I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
More work to clean up legacy pollution on the St. Louis River begins next month. We'll have more on restoration plans for Grassy Point and Kingsbury Bay.
The Duluth Superior Film Festival celebrates 10 years next week. We'll talk to some local filmmakers about the festival.
And we'll have the week's top economic headlines from Business North.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello again and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. This week's show was recorded Wednesday afternoon due to the Memorial Day weekend. Now here's Julie with our first topic.
All right, thank you, Denny, and welcome everyone. A public meeting was held this week to talk about plans to continue cleaning up the St. Louis River from pollution left behind by decades-old industry. Two areas on the Minnesota side of the river will see major cleanup and restoration efforts starting in June. Here to tell us more about these projects is Barb Huberty, the St. Louis River Area of Concern Coordinator for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And Melissa Sjolund is the Area of Concern Coordinator for the Minnesota DNR. And thanks to both of you for being here. Really appreciate you coming in.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Now, Barb, your two agencies are working together on cleanup and restoration. Can you give us a little bit of insight into how that works?
Sure. Well, in Minnesota, we have both the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, which handles more of the water quality issues related to the cleanup, and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources is handling more of the aquatic habitat restoration side. So the natural resources expertise is in habitat and our expertise is in water quality.
Melissa, can you talk to us a little bit about the cause of the pollution in this area and perhaps how long ago that was?
Yeah, at the two sites that we're working on this summer, Kingsbury Bay and Grassy Point, we're trying to address legacy contaminants or legacy impacts to the habitat. At Grassy Point, in the late 1800s, there were two sawmills located out on the river. So the practice at the time was to mill the logs right out onto the water and basically drop all of the excess sawdust and wood waste right into the river where it remains today.
Interesting to see some of those old historic pictures of the logs being floated in there. And so a lot of that wood still remains on site. Is any of it salvageable, or is it all really in a waste sort of a state?
Well, fortunately, they weren't treating the wood with the chemicals back then, but it is in deposits that are up to 16 to 20 feet deep. It's actually mounded up to form islands, which you can see in aerial photos from Grassy Point. So the wood waste is really thick there. There's so much of it that would be really difficult to actually remove it and take it off site. So we're going to be moving it around and actually using it to build habitat features on the site.
Is it toxic and dangerous to either habitat, animal habitat, or human beings?
Not at this particular location. The sediment concerns are being addressed at our remediation sites, so those are the ones we need to clean up the contaminated sediments. At this particular site, the contamination is not the concern, it's the loss of habitat.
Sure. And where will all this stuff be put once it's taken out of the water?
So the wood waste at Grassy Point will be taken out of the water and it'll be consolidated to form a new habitat feature on site. So this habitat feature is going to be like an island that's actually going to extend out and shelter the bay behind it. And when you shelter a bay, you help reduce the wind and wave energy that comes in there, and it helps make a really nice habitat for wetland plants and fish and other wildlife.
For people who are maybe not familiar where these projects are located, I think we have a map, and you can kind of explain what's going on on that map with these specific sites and some of the other ones that people are seeing?
Why don't you start, Melissa, since they're showing the
Yes.
restoration sites.
Okay.
Yep, so the sites that you're seeing on the map, these are all of the restoration sites that have been planned for the area of concern. So some of these have been completed, some of them are in progress, and some of them will be completed in the future. The two projects that we're working on this summer, Grassy Point and Kingsbury Bay. Grassy Point is just kind of south of Central Avenue, located near the old railroad bridge. And then Kingsbury Bay is located just downstream from the zoo.
What kind of costs are we looking at, and where's the money coming from?
Well, the costs are different for every single project depending upon what the issues are. And so far, we've spent about $8 million completing cleanup sites, the contaminated sediment sites, and $8 million on 3 habitat restoration sites. We'll be spending another $64 million on remediation sites and another $51 million or so on habitat restoration sites. So those are estimates. The money comes from a whole variety of sources. The major funding partner is the federal government through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. They pay for 65% of the costs. And then the state is obligated to pay for 35% of the costs. And for the habitat projects, we're lucky to have our Outdoor Heritage Fund money available to us. On the cleanup side, we're using clean water funds. And then we also have a couple of sites where we've been able to use some natural resources damages assessment money from prior Superfund sites.
So either Duluthians or Superiorites won't be looking at property tax hikes to help with this.
No.
Now, there were 3 remediation projects that were completed last fall in the harbor. Talk
Right.
about those a little bit and whether there were any lessons learned in that process that might help you moving forward to other sites.
Well, I don't know that there were any surprises. There is a lot of work that happens on the front end before we can get to the construction point. We have to figure out what the contaminants are, where they are, what the sediments are like, what our options are for our remedy. And so once you get to that point and then design your project, it's the actual construction is fairly straightforward. So the 3 projects we finished last year were all in slips. So Minnesota slip was 1, slip 3, and slip C were the other 2. And they went fairly quickly and straightforward. You know, it takes years of planning, but the construction part on those was only a matter of months. And the most difficult thing, I think, for all of our projects is the impact of weather, because all of our projects are in the water. So if we are dealing with stormy conditions or you know, just acts of God that can impact your construction project, it can slow things down.
Melissa, how much cleaner is the St. Louis River today than, say, 10 or 20 years ago?
You know, I think that we're doing a lot of work to clean up the habitat and clean up the sediments. So contaminated sediments can impact water quality, could impact the health of the entire food chain, starting from the very bottom. So as we're cleaning these up, we're just making it incrementally cleaner every time we go and clean up sediment or make a habitat much cleaner.
Is this a Superfund site?
No, these are not Superfund sites. The area of concern program targets sites that do have legacy impacts.
I see.
But they're not Superfund sites.
Talk about the big picture in terms of how the projects that were completed last year and the ones that are going to be done this year fit into the big picture of getting the St. Louis River delisted.
Yeah, so within our area of concern program, which is a bi-national program, and our AOC happens to be a bi-state AOC, involves Wisconsin projects and Minnesota projects. We have a plan that has 78 management actions that are broken down according to the type of impairment, and we have 9 impairments in total, and we've removed 2 of the impairments. So as we get all the projects done under each impairment, then we can request to the Environmental Protection Agency that the impairment be removed, and eventually we can then ask to be delisted. So right now we have 44% of our management actions complete. So we're moving along at a good pace. We hope to be done, at least with the major construction projects, by 2024. But we have other types of activities that we have to do as well that will extend that period. But ideally, if we had our wishes, we'd be delisted by 2025.
Could bad weather or other circumstances slow down the project?
Absolutely. I mean, you just can't predict everything that we need to do, and our schedule is a best guess of a best case scenario if everything works according to plan, but we still have a lot of work to do to figure out what designs we're going to use, what remedies we're going to use, and then there's just the whole contracting process that takes time for
You hope
each
to start
project.
in June.
Well, every year it's different depending upon what the permit conditions are. So with Kingsbury Bay Grassy Point, they will start in June, but we've already started doing pre-design sample collection for the summer.
What about impacts that people who use that area might run into this summer? Anything in terms of traffic or areas where people have to avoid? If so, where do they get information?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think people can expect to see some impacts to recreation on both the water side and the land side. So as we're working at both of these projects, we'll be using barges to transport material. So people will need to be mindful of barge traffic. As we're out working on sites, we wouldn't want people fishing or boating right near an active dredging operation. Also out at Kingsbury Bay, the Western Waterfront Trail goes around that. So we'll be out there cleaning up sediment. We'll be needing to use some of those trails to get equipment down. So people can expect to see some trail closures and hopefully some signage to help get them around and get back on the trail.
And information online?
We do have a website. So the DNR has a St. Louis River Restoration Initiative website. So we'll be posting periodic updates so people will know when we'll be working in certain
All right,
areas.
Melissa, Sjolund, Barb, Huberty, thank you so much for coming in and sharing
Thanks for
some
having us.
information. Good luck through the construction season.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thank you.
both.
This is the RIPLIST draft for 2017.
Well, you can start then, Krista.
All right. I was debating between Donald Trump.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Oh, awesome pick.
I almost picked Trump. I almost picked Trump today. And Kirk Douglas. Well, it's just a bunch of people who come together. We pick 15 people who are well known in all different areas. And then we just think that they might potentially die in the next year.
It's not that we're rooting for people to die, it's just that if we think they're going to, then we draft them just as though they were NFL football players.
All right, I'll take Oscar-nominated film director. I always take him from Alfie, and he directed 3 Bond films, Lewis Gilbert.
It's a long shot, but I'm gonna go with Richard Simmons. Something is up with Richard Simmons.
I'll take King Michael of Romania.
It's exciting. I know people think it's morbid, but I think we're really honoring these people. Who wakes up every day and thinks, I wonder how Olivia de Havilland is doing today? We do.
I am going to pick Baby Peggy,
Yeah.
the last great silent film baby.
Who isn't interested in death? Death is something we all should be interested in, but death is something we, as human beings, are taught never to think about.
There's a stigma to it. I know people who don't want to talk about funeral arrangements, they don't want to talk about healthcare directives. It's like, dude, you are gonna die. Like, you could die tomorrow. You could die in 10 minutes. Like, why? It's gonna happen.
And that was the trailer for RIPLIST, a film that will be featured on opening night of the Duluth Superior Film Festival. Now this year, the festival celebrates its 10th year in the Twin Ports. It's an opportunity for local and regional filmmakers to get their productions in front of a local audience. And so joining us to talk about the festival are 2 filmmakers whose work will be featured. Mike Scholtz is the man behind RIPLIST, and Lance Karasti's film, Hyper Dark, will also be screened at the festival. I want to thank both of you for being here. This is a rather interesting subject. We're going to see a clip from Lance's film in a few minutes, but Mike, maybe right now you can tell us a little bit about how you got the inspiration for making this particular film.
Sure. I met one of the members of the Celebrity Death Pool at a film festival in Fargo, North Dakota. And I noticed as I became friends with him on Facebook that he spent a lot of his time talking about dead celebrities, who was dying, who was sick, you know, that sort of thing. And so I finally asked a mutual friend, you know, what's his deal? And I found out that he likes to do this celebrity death pool as a hobby. And they have a lot of fun doing it.
I hope you're both feeling well.
I'm not a celebrity, so it doesn't matter. Did you immediately know that this was something that might make a really cool documentary? Because it's a very interesting, odd, but kind of funny premise.
I did. Matt O'Lean actually works for Prairie Public Television, and he came to Duluth and did a story on me and some of my films. And he said, hey, do you want to go out afterwards? And I was thinking, yes, I do want to go out afterwards and really interrogate you about this hobby of yours and see if it might make a good documentary. So I kind of had this plan in the back of my brain. And you know, he had a lot of interesting answers about how they choose celebrities that might die and whether they think their game is even moral.
Lance, how important is the film festival to the city of Duluth?
Oh, it's extremely important. It basically provides a platform for local filmmakers and artists to come together, meet each other, network, but also show off their work to a community who is really seeking art. That's what's great about Duluth, is that there is just such a community of people here who just wants to see new and exciting projects. They'll go see things not even really understanding or knowing what they are, just because they're seeking it out. And it basically just serves as this nice little home base for this community of artists to kind of launch out of, essentially.
Other than showing your films, what else will be going on in this week-long project?
Well, something I'm really excited about is there's a bunch of events happening, a lot of different kinds of non-film events. We have something this year that is called, for legal reasons, we can't call this a TED Talk, which is, you can guess, basically a TED Talk. And my friend and producer of the festival, Matt Dressel, will be hosting, I believe, the first talk, which is about the morality of watching bad films. And if it's okay to make fun of other films, stuff like that. Things that I think we've both probably struggled with when we watch other artists, because every time you make fun of another movie, you're just thinking, is someone doing this to me? So I'm very excited to see that. I have a lot of thoughts about it.
Now, beyond a film festival like this, where would a film, say, like RIPLIST, find an audience?
Yeah, it's tricky. You know, you try to get your film in film festivals to sort of build up some word of mouth, get a few reviews, and maybe attract the attention of a distributor or two. And a distributor will help get your film maybe on iTunes or Netflix, and that's kind of what you're hoping for. You can also just self-distribute your film. I mean, we live in an age where YouTube and Vimeo exist, fortunately, and so we've both done that with films where we haven't managed to get a distributor to kind of put their weight behind the film. You can self-distribute it, and still, you know, thousands and thousands of people will see
Do you
your
also
film.
want to get your films in local theaters?
Yeah, you
for
do
sure.
ideally. I think our films have both played at Zinema,
Yes, yeah.
which is a good home locally for a film that's a little bit outside the box like that.
Do you find theaters such as that in most markets? Where
No, unfortunately not. It's usually a Duluth-sized market, and above will have an independent cinema like that. But yeah, there's a lot of communities out there that are going to have to rely on YouTube or Netflix for some of their more unusual fare.
Lance, set up your film a little bit, Hyper Dark, because we also have the trailer for that.
Yeah, Hyper Dark is it's a movie that's hard to describe. Matt, the producer of the festival, he describes it as genreless. Someone else described it as an anti-film. It's essentially an improvisational character study where the whole point was to try to make something that just felt real, that just felt like instead of looking at a screen, you were looking out of a window and just watching reality. And it has a story. It's about someone having a breakdown after a paranormal encounter. But for me, the movie is really about just that hyper-naturalistic feeling that we were going for.
All right, well, let's take a look at the trailer.
I have been out here since that bonfire.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
certainly a night.
Yeah, Mark was telling me kind of had like some sort of episode and everything, and I was like, oh my god, like what's going on? But it seems like you're doing pretty all right now, and going out. And,
Episode. Mark said I had an episode.
I mean,
Did he tell you? Did Mark tell you what I told him?
I was gone, man, and now
What are you talking about? You were gone.
I was nothing. There was nothing. I wasn't anything, and now I'm back, and I'm telling you, I know things I'm not supposed to know.
Wow, my heart's racing a little bit. Now, you said this was improvisational. Was there no script at all going into it?
No, there was no script. I kind of had an outline going on in my head, but the idea was to have a situation where actors were showing up and kind of dictating where the movie would go. So not even I really know where it was going to go, but I did have some secret ideas, and I'm sure Mike relates to that, making documentaries and stuff. You want to just capture what's there, but you also kind of hope to know where it's going.
Is this a more difficult way to make a movie?
Not for me. I used to make movies with scripts and more traditionally based on what I had learned at film school, and there was just a lot of difficult aspects to that I just really stopped liking. So I decided to redo the process from the ground up and just try to make something that just worked for me and worked for the community of artists around me.
Mm-hmm. Now, does today's digital camera equipment and editing capabilities, does that make it easier for someone like you to edit your own, to shoot and edit your own movie?
Yeah, it does. It almost makes it too easy. In fact, I'm working with someone right now making a documentary about Knife River, Minnesota, and we decided to shoot much of it on 16 millimeter.
Oh, really?
Just to have some fun with an old format. And really to make it harder on ourselves, because it is so easy now to pick up a camera anywhere.
So production then is probably a whole lot less costly than it would be for, say, Hollywood studios.
Yeah, it is. We can really...
Yeah, for sure. Especially with Hyperdark, we had scenes where we were just redoing the takes without cutting, and they went on for 2 straight hours, where with the film magazine, it would cut after 11 minutes no matter what, and then you had to pay like $100 more to do another round.
Mm-hmm. Talk about how the festival works for people who may be interested in taking in one or all of the films that are going to be screened.
Well, the first thing to know is that it's totally free. It always has been, and I think hopefully always will be.
But donations are welcome.
Donations are welcome. We sell $30 passes that get you front of the line, first access into the theater, which is important because most of our showings sell out these days. And it also just promotes the festival and helps us going and keeps it going.
And
every
again,
year.
quickly, when is it?
The 30th.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, the 29th.
Yep, the 29th.
29th,
through,
Wednesday.
Through June 2nd.
Okay, very fine. Thank you very much. Coming up soon. Appreciate you both being here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, it's time now for the week's economic news from the editors at Business North. The University of Wisconsin Superior has purchased a facility to conduct large-scale testing of ballast water treatment systems. It's the only land-based plant on the Great Lakes and can test whether treatment systems successfully prevent the spread of invasive species through ships' ballast water. UW Superior reached a deal in April with the Northeast Midwest Institute for the purchase. The two parties declined to comment on the amount paid for the facility.
Less than a year after wrapping up construction on the first phase of a massive rebuild of Superior Street in downtown Duluth, the city is digging up a section of the street again to repair a water leak. City crews discovered a leaking coupling on the water main installed last summer under Superior Street between the library and the Radisson Hotel. Excavation to replace the coupling began this week. Crews will also replace a second similar coupling as a precautionary measure.
Xcel Energy said this week it plans to shut its 2 remaining coal plants in the upper Midwest a decade earlier than scheduled, putting the utility on pace to be coal-free by 2030. The Sherco 3 coal plant would close in 2030 following the closure of the Allen S. King coal plant in 2028. The company also said it intends to keep its nuclear power plant in Monticello, Minnesota, running until at least 2040 as it expands wind and solar energy generation. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
If you have a comment about our show, call now, dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send an email to almanacnorth@wdsc.org. And you can stay up to date on your favorite PBS programs by visiting our website, where you'll also find news about the station and upcoming public events. And Julie will be watching for the special session of the Minnesota Legislature, and we'll have an update when it wraps up.
That's always an exciting program.
It certainly is. All right. For Julie and the crew at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great Memorial Day. Good night, everybody, and be kind.